Okay, we're live, everybody.
So turn to the pages of the Shepherd's Guide for the service you're looking for. Pick it up in the Shepherd's Guide. Look us up in the Shepherd's Guide. Call us up, see why we say it's the Christian's choice of yellow pages.
To advertise or receive your free copy, call 716-688-3882.
Serving Orchard Park, Lackawanna, Cheektowaga, Amherst, Buffalo. We are the legendary Mix 1080, WUFO, and Power 96.5.
Locally, nationally, it's Conversation with Jim Anderson. And now, your host, Jim Anderson.
Good morning, Buffalo. It is not Jim. Oh, sorry, just. Good morning, Buffalo. It is the Jim Anderson show today, but it is not Jim, it's Austin Martin. I'm joined here with a very interesting guest for a couple reasons. One of the first reasons being this is the first repeat guest I've ever had, so it's the first time I'm going to get a chance to see a real-time update with you guys. I'm joined by the interesting and knowledgeable Ashley Brunner. Again, this is the president of the Police Advisory Board, which was recently, in the last time we interviewed her, going through some changes that were being made on the back end to maybe dissolve or change that board at a very high level, different from what it was. And so before I elaborate too much, I want to definitely give a chance for the guest to introduce herself, talk about how she's doing today, and more importantly, the changes that we've seen today versus the last time we spoke.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's Ashley Brunner. I'm doing really good. Since we have spoken last, we've basically had a town hall. We've had a furtherance of a discussion regarding body cameras, also followed up with the resident, and we just had great ideas about what we see as a future of community policing and potentially what it might take to get there. So
absolutely. So if I could ask, just for the viewers first listening, can you talk about kind of what we were looking at last time we spoke? I don't want to go a little more in depth just to catch people up, and then talk about what happened at the town hall meeting and some of these ideas that you had and how will they play out in the community?
Okay, so essentially what we spoke about last time was body camera issues as far as residents trying to obtain said footage from various interactions, whether they were domestics or just a call to the department for further assistance. Specifically, the resident that I'm talking about is a resident who has had an order of protection against the party that she consistently calls on, and she still, again, cannot obtain her full body camera footage. Through the process of trying to assist the resident, we've discussed the board being dissolved. It was dissolved by the Common Council. Then it was picked up and turned into a nonprofit by myself, and the other board members that were remaining went forward in an attempt to continue on with some of the public safety concerns that we had, whether at the time it was response call times, lack of cruisers, officer interactions with citizens, etc. We did have a town hall, and we had one person show up to the town hall. And I would love to discuss more so one of the issues we kind of run into with base building and kind of getting the community connected and plugged in. It's very difficult to try to relay the importance of, these finite details when it comes to dealing with people charged with public safety. And one of the difficulties that I've had is that I've been surprised that policing is not a hot enough topic to where I might have droves of people coming forward. Previously, in the past with the board, when it was attached to the council, there was a large outpouring. I don't know if that was more so situational because it was the pandemic, we were locked down, the events surrounding George Floyd's murder, the flare-up that happened in the city following that. I don't know if there was more of an interest then. We've gone through multiple motions, whether it be political, social in the city. But one thing has absolutely remained is that the police and public relations have absolutely not gotten better. It's declined. And in fact, I'd say some of the work that the Police Advisory Board pushed for previously has kind of started to fall apart. And that point was driven home when the council disbanded the board. So going forward, what I would like to see is people to kind of give a little reciprocity for their neighbors. Perhaps you don't live in a particularly crime-ridden area where you're worried about body camera footage, but you never know when you're going to interact with an officer, and it's really important. It's really important to have an understanding of, some of the procedures that BPD would go through. And I think on the most basic level, an ability to be able to visually capture the interaction is so important. And it's extremely alarming when people cannot go back and get their archived footage that should be there for upwards to 5 years. So that's what I really want people to pay attention to, because really, what happens if you want to go back and civilly sue? What happens if you retain an attorney and there's further questions about your incident? If the officer did not engage the camera or didn't find it necessary, then what is your protection? And furthermore, it's a protection for the officer, right? So it's a protective measure for all parties. We need to be able to document thoroughly what's happening in these citizen public official interactions, officer interactions. So that's really what our focus is at this moment, because we see the importance and the damage that a lack of that footage can create for people when they're trying to find resolutions.
Absolutely, and I want to definitely spend a lot of time talking about awareness. I recognize even in my personal life of communication, if I believe that I'm working on a product that's going to help people and change their lives, the issue is, well, why aren't they coming to me? Why don't they care? And like you said, sometimes it is situational, contextual, but the thing that we have to recognize when we're working on high level things that maybe everybody doesn't see the importance of is, like you can recognize it's a marathon. And so making sure that we're going the right way and hitting the right pain points, because you got someone coming home from a 9 to 5 and it's like, okay, what am I going to spend these next couple hours with?
Right.
And so making sure that they recognize that this is deeper than just a town meeting, this is deeper than just policy, this affects all of us as something so important. But I want to, before we jump forward, because like I said, this is my second episode of this almost show, is going back to the lady you said, of the person we're working with trying to achieve body cam footage. One of the things that I look at with the government that's so scary is it's not necessarily that the government isn't going to work, but it's the fear that the government's going to take too long, right? Let's say I go in for a case and I'm waiting for my trial. I'm scared I'm going to stay waiting for trial forever. That's one of my fears, because it seems like the government is this big machine that moves very slow. Maybe by design, I personally believe so, but it moves very, very slow. So talk about a person still at this point trying to get justice, still trying to get light, and still trying to achieve that body camera footage. What do you do? What do you do when you're trying and it's not working and it's been taking this long? What do you do at that point?
Me personally, what I do, I get a real icky feeling personally when you have to diminish something that is inherently negative and bad that could be entirely detrimental, not only to yourself, but to the group. So for me personally, regardless of shame, regardless of people choosing to disassociate from me, I would still press forward in whatever fashion I could, so that if that's an internal affairs complaint, that's what I'm going to do. If I need to go down and try to speak with Commissioner Gramaglia, I'm also going to try to do that. All things, by the way, that my resident has tried. My resident in Lovejoy, particularly Kaisertown, has repeatedly reached out to Councilman Brian Bowman, for which he has admitted privately to me on the phone that she was denied 6 times in chambers. And I want people to understand this. She's looking for body camera footage. She has petitioned to go into chambers to discuss it on 6 different occasions and was denied. My councilman was advised to stay out of it, whatever that means. So yes, does government move very slow? Absolutely. Do people cushion personal relationships in an effort to get forward and don't care about the fallout of the suppression? Absolutely. I mean, we have this resident as a prime example who I think would like to later in the morning call in and just give her experience as far as the obstacles she's faced in this particular event. But you have to just keep putting your foot forward. The city is, for the most part, not going to work with you when you have a complaint. And what we've learned is that good, bad, or ugly, you must proceed forward with the information, because keeping that information away from the residents could potentially stop someone else from resolving an issue. So it's always kind of one foot in front of the other, even when it doesn't feel the greatest, but you do what's right.
Absolutely. And we recognize that even though everybody doesn't have that determination, the people like you that do are so important to allow us to get there. I just had a question. Hold on, give me a second. I'm about to come back. I close my eyes a little bit. It's on the tip of my tongue. Okay, so we're gonna move on. I know it's gonna come back, and I'm just gonna want to ask it because it was a good question. But going back in, like we said, the awareness piece. Are there other things you can talk about that make this more essential to everyday people, right? We talk about, let's look at insurance, right? You don't need it till you need it. And body camera footage is one of the things that it sounds like you don't need it until you need it. So for a regular person, why else is this so important that we should be focused on it? This is something we should focus on in our daily conversations, right? Because we talk about police issues, police relations, but then we get to more specific issues like body camera footage, and all the support kind of seems to diminish a little bit. It's a lot more fun when we're talking in the sky. When we go into kind of the real work, right? Picking an issue to focus on, it seems like everybody kind of gets into disarray. Why is body camera footage a good place to start? And why is it so much more impactful than people realize?
Okay, so that's a wonderful question, and I will use a very familiar example because you can't tell me that you don't know who she is. So good morning, Ms. Grant. We're going to talk about you this morning. She had a fender bender scenario. I don't particularly remember what part of town she was in. This was just a few weeks ago. I only know briefly about it because I was tagged in it. What was happening was Ms. Grant was getting biased treatment from the officer, and she was unable to obtain the report on the side of the road after being involved in a vehicular incident with the other car. Ms. Grant states that the officer was providing preferential treatment, for which the officer responds to Ms. Grant, well, she's Hispanic. Either he said she's Hispanic or she's Puerto Rican. I apologize if I didn't get the correct term that he said. But Ms. Grant went live, and one of the things that Ms. Grant was saying is what was the procedure? This doesn't feel right. You're supposed to give me particular information, and people were popping up get his badge information, get this, get that. And one of the things that kind of brought up that was very concerning for me is body camera footage, right? So the body camera footage, they will say will stay on, but it's up to discretionary use to turn it off. So who knows if during that whole incident, the camera was even on, because you'd have to have lights and sirens activated, right? When you're pulling up to a scene for this camera to be on. When we were here last in the studio, we had a board member explain, kind of briefly touch on how the Axon body camera would come, into use. What was also explained by our board member was that once the lights are initiated with the vehicle, that the body camera is going to record 30 seconds prior to the initiation of those lights. So you get audio and visual. It's never one or the other. So one of the things that's concerning is are these officers leaving the body camera footage on when they're interacting with someone like Ms. Grant, while she's verbalizing that her rights feel as though they're being violated, and she's not necessarily getting respectful treatment. So let's just say something happened with that vehicle report and it didn't have full details. Well, then Ms. Grant might have to go and FOIA request that body camera footage. Would it be there? That's the question. Policy says, it's very loose, by the way, minimum of 6 months, max of 5 years. It should be on file. Would it be there though? If it's portions of it is up to discretionary use,
Right.
And that's the concerning part, because if we're budgeting for body cameras to the tune of $1 million roughly, right? And we're renewing these contracts with Axon, what are we spending money for if it is not the legal protection that we all need? And it's not just for us as residents, it protects the officer too, right? So it's protection across the board. And I don't understand much like a seatbelt, why it is not in use all the time. It just doesn't make sense.
Right. Why the pushback? And it's difficult because it's almost like checking the fact checker, right? If this is
Right.
their policy, right, who checks Google when we look things up, right? So it's
Right.
very difficult. I remember the question now. I had to go back to the memory archives for a sec. I remember the question. What it talked about is what I keep commonly hearing, and I learned about this in school, is called lobbying, right? And where you go, lobbying is when you bring people to office, in my knowledge, shout out Canisius High School, but in my knowledge, you go bring people to office and you petition and you advocate and you talk for change. And a lot of those deals happen behind closed doors. And it's sounding like a lot of the decisions that are being made regarding the police advisory board, things like stay out of it when it comes to residents in case by case basis. It seems like a lot of decisions are being made behind the scenes where the public maybe doesn't have the knowledge or the view or the connections to know what's really being said. What do we do with those, right? What do we do when deals are being made behind closed doors as residents? What are we supposed to do when we're not getting this information? Who do we speak to? Or is it a matter of you need to work on getting new people in office?
You asked a lot. Okay, so here's my thing. You cannot force anybody to do anything, right? The only way to force something to change is through a vote. We have been through so many waves of voting in the city. And I think one of the things that prevents votes from being effective is comprehension, truly understanding what you're voting for instead of being told to vote, right? So for me, I feel as though you have to have a fire in your stomach, right? Like if we're talking about communities and neighborhood, it's reciprocity across the board. What's good for me is good for you, is good for our neighbor over there, and it's good for the neighbor on the other side of town. And we have to practice what we preach, but Buffalo is driven by silos, right? We work so separately. What's happening in Lovejoy is not happening in East Buffalo, which is, I'm not a fan of that name, by the way. East Buffalo, which is not happening in North Buffalo, which is not happening, in the west side of Buffalo. So it's like, it's very, we have to agree as a community to be on the same page. Then we can care at an equal level. Once we care at an equal level, we can make community-based agreements for things that we're not going to allow any regression on, which should be safety, which should be no matter what our professional associations are, we must keep each other safe. One of the issues that I think where we kind of stop making progress forward, particularly, let's use the council, for example. And I apologize because I cannot remember the name that Councilman Rivera gave this new community policing board. But what I will say is it's filled with social workers, attorneys, and other professionals, right? But that's not a total reflective scope of what the city of Buffalo is. I'm not seeing tons of blue collar workers. I'm not seeing average people. I'm not seeing college students. I'm not seeing anybody from a high school background. We're not seeing a full scope of what the community is. So therefore we know that any issues we're encountering are truly going to be stifled to a degree, because the people that are sitting in these professional capacities are definitely not trudging through the same waters I am, or the same ones that you are. So it becomes very difficult to hold people accountable when politicians continually pacify by putting people in place, whether it's in a nonprofit capacity or if it's within City Hall or council chambers, that are just simply going to give people something to satiate them for the moment, but nothing long-term. And that's why we keep running into that problem. Too many professional associations where we're not going to speak up, but not enough good, hardworking people from the community that have great ideas, trauma, stories to tell that could better policies or even change them, who can come to the forefront. That's really why we stop at so many angles, because the moment we get close to a story that could truly change policy, there is always somebody like a Brian Bowman there to tell you that, I can't let you in chambers. Sorry, on your first through sixth try, And that's the kind of thing we want to stop. We want to bring everybody together, let them know their stories are valid, let them know regardless of leadership, whatever political affiliation you might have, if the story pertains to the policies that affect us all, we want to hear it. And it's valid. It's at least valid over here to me.
I definitely think so. And something you talked about, which I think was so important, was the divisions that we have in such a small city. And like you said, people in policy positions are making decisions benefiting few that are affecting all. I think that looking at what we can control, right? Because we can spend our whole time saying, oh, this person is, but what can we control as people? And let me ask you, we're in the city of good neighbors, right? We're all from Buffalo. But if you can think of some, what are some things that are deeper than just us all living here? That North, South, East, Buffalo, Lovejoy, anywhere could understand it. What are those things that we should be looking to unite us? Because what it seems like we always go back to is we're all from Buffalo. But that's clearly not creating enough of a unity for us to say we're all from Buffalo, so let's move for Buffalo. Clearly that's not what's happening.
I think, well, let me say this. I think leadership gives off a poor perception of what Buffalo is. Because that's not I don't get that everywhere I go in the city. Like, I get love every place I go. Like, our neighbors are awesome. Some people might be rougher around the edges. When you've been kicked around a lot, you see how good your attitude might be. If you have to get up every day and claw for decency and water and food and shelter and tenant rights and public safety things, like you would be worn down too. So the one thing I always want to kind of remember is to give grace to people, because people are going through a ton of things. And I think personally, a couple of topics we can always agree upon that we can look back to leadership and hold them accountable for is, number one, our water. I mean, our City Action Buffalo did a great campaign trying to bring forth a light to the problems that were happening within the city. One of them was that our water and our lead is greater than that of Flint, Michigan. And it's actually quite concerning. And the soil levels were other things that they spoke about. Much like us, public safety things are also things they've spoken about. I mean, we've come together on a variety of fronts to address these issues. It's just whether or not leadership cares about it. But I think the neighbors care about it. We can unite behind food, climate justice, tenant rights. Those are things people are actively organizing behind. But, because we do come from this silo kind of background, we do have to work on breaking down those barriers, because I think that is the one thing that kind of prevents us. And that's what leadership is good at maintaining, right? We deal with this part of town, you deal with that part of town, this councilman, we don't have councilman at large anymore, right? So no one to oversee that our general needs are met as a group. So everything feels even more separate now. But we've got neighbors going district to district growing food. We have neighbors going district to district sharing clothing, watching babies. We have people doing so much work, and it goes unacknowledged by leadership because it's easier to control people by making them believe that we're all so separate. We're really not.
Right. I think maybe some people need to take just a drive around Buffalo, like you said, to see the city of good neighbors for a real chance. I think sometimes people spend their whole lives, like you said, being told what this side is like, being told what these particular group of people are like. And I think that we could be so much further. People would just go see for themselves. Taking a shift, because I know you're spending a lot of time talking about the past. I want to look to the forward, right? You've been making some changes with this, not a nonprofit, and your position within it. Can you talk about some of the things that you guys are looking to do, some of the future plans, and we'll get into more of the contact stuff later.
Yeah, so I would love to make regular town halls a thing. Couple things. I think when you're not the favorite in the group, sometimes people will not want to listen to you as much. I don't have tons of experience with base building, but I'm a mom and I want to talk about the things that are making people upset. So I'm always down for gathering people together in a very intellectual manner, one where we're not beating each other up too badly. There are going to be times we exchange information we're not going to be pleased, but we still have to work together nonetheless, whether we're pleased or displeased, right? With that being said, I just kind of want the board to grow. But one of the things that people, without naming names, have said to me, when are you going to get it funded? When are you going to get it funded? Now, one of my big concerns for public safety is that when you bring money into the game, it changes the game a bit. I saw how the police advisory board attempted to function once I got on it. And I'll say attempted because there was no way I was ever going to be silent about mistreatment of people behind closed doors, right? And because I, along with another board member, were so vocal that council canned that, right? So the fear is always that if we continually bring these things up, are people going to want to hear it? Are they going to stifle it? Are they going to find ways to make it invalid? And when I get asked the question about funding it, like the positions, my number one fear is that the board will go back to a complacent place. And what I want is genuine. I know it's a lot to ask, right? But I think the genuine hard work of like, you're just coming together collectively to give ideas. I think that's something we can do. And I think people look at me because it is a nonprofit and they're like, okay, we'll fund it. That's what, like people need jobs. Nobody's going to help you. Like, and then I kind of shy away like, I could kind of do this with the people I have. Like, thank you for your time. But it makes me nervous because when money comes into the game, it changes personalities. We've seen it recently with council, closed door special meetings, giving ourselves raise, pats on the back. I don't want to put myself in that position again. And I furthermore don't want to put residents in that position, right? People should just want to help each other because it benefits us as the group. And that is the number one obstacle I face because unfortunately there are nonprofits that exist that generate lots of funding, but don't do solid work in the city, don't produce a result. That's not what we want to do. And that's why with the existing board members we have, we've been very choosy about who to let in because the mission is very serious. It's public safety, and I don't think you have to pay for safety like that. I think as a community, we can come together and give free answers that can change policy, period. That's just what we should do.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that you talked about with the society that we live in, it is very money driven, money forward facing. And so sometimes when you're trying to work on something, the whole passion versus profit, like you said, that decision is very difficult. And if you may choose profit or you may choose passion, but can I trust that every time everybody gets elected, they're always going to choose passion? That becomes, like you said, a difficult slope. People may begin to go to the other side because, like we said, bills aren't paid on love nowadays. We recognize that. But that being said, I think that if we had more organizations that were just focused on the passion piece, the heart piece, or the mission piece, there would be a lot more resolutions being made, a lot more things being done. But people feel like if you don't have the money, it's not real sometimes, right? If you don't have the numbers, it's not real. And like I said, I want to talk more about what you're currently working on so people can see that it is real. Right, just because you have numbers doesn't make you real, right? So, but this is all things that people aren't. If you don't do the homework, you don't have the education, you won't know. Talk to me more about what you're working on, the structure. You said the people that you have. What are some people that you have, or the structure of the organization, or is it exactly similar to the board that it was before?
It's not similar to the board that it was before. The people that we have now, particular members on the board. I won't go into all of their skill sets as they do a lot of private work that's deeply important in the community. And I just would not want to expose that by any means. But what I will say is the board now is very focused on what can we do to do a group effort. Like I know that there are people that have stories and concerns about policy. It's how do we get people to the table to feel like it's trusted? When you're a new face, it's very hard for people to come in and kind of share with you what they're going through, where you could relate it to potential policy pitfalls, and they won't feel comfortable speaking if they don't know you, right? So I kind of thought with some of the people that I would know, it would garner more bodies to the table of kind of providing safety, right? Reassurance to the people that are new. What I'm finding is that this is Buffalo. We work in silos. If it's not the particular person talking, nobody wants to hear it. Nonetheless, I just want to encourage people, please. Anytime the police advisory board is having a town hall, wants you to come to the table. Last time I was willing to barbecue. We had the one person show up. Well, I was super grateful that he showed up, and he was somebody who is awesome and very intellectually attuned to what's happening with Buffalo Police and the council. But I wanted more residents, every day, people kind of like people that are going through things in Lovejoy, like my resident over there. I want people to just be open-minded and work together as a group. Like, just understand the power you hold. We don't need particular people or notable people that we know to bring us to the table. There are so many intelligent people that could be excellent leaders here in the city. And please don't be shy coming to the table and talking about any of this stuff. You could potentially be the person that is the effector in the policy change. I just want to encourage people to just please come to the table, because we're going to get to a point with the police department, and I'll just use the Kia boys as an example. I'm afraid that we're going to have a catastrophic event, right, between the agitations that BPD has and the residents, that there may be, I'm worried that there may be a death of some sort, and it's going to launch us into federal oversight, which we do need. We really need it.
I think we'll absolutely keep touching on that. Before we go to break, I just want to say, if you want to call in, you can call in at 716-837-1112. We'll be right back after the break. Thank you.
There is a comment on Facebook from a Rachel
That's her.
D. Alessandro. So if you want to read that from Facebook, if you want to go onto Jim's page on Facebook, and you can read that comment, and then it came in a minute ago, but I didn't want to interrupt. And we're still live on Facebook, so if there's anything else that you want to share with people while we're here.
Yeah, so I just think it's always very hard to like get everybody together as a group. We've tried to make it non-threatening, kind of more family friendly, like community based. It's I can't tell you if I think it's strategy that people are not coming to the table, because it very well could be. And that's an unfortunate factor to consider, right? You wouldn't want to ever think it's political strategy, but it's political strategy to not show up and support measures like these, because it falls back on our local leaders, right? Like, if people have these questions and concerns, well, what are you doing during these legislative hours? And for years on end, they get 4 years in those chairs. What are you doing every 4 years? What legislation is positively propelling, your district to something positive? And you're not going to find a lot of it. You find a lot of speed bumps, find a lot of raises, find a lot of concerts, find a lot of backpacks, find a lot of giveaways, find a lot of boxes of food being given away, all great stuff. But these are all temporary things that pacify, whereas the legislation changes what we really need.
And we're back again. If you want to call in, you can call in at 716-837-1112 and join the conversation. It is the Conversation with Jim Anderson morning show with your co-host Austin Martin and our guest Ashley Brunner. Going back into it, we spent a lot of time talking about the word, getting the word out there, awareness. And one of the biggest things I've seen now on this show with people all working on great topics is that's a big issue, is awareness. So what are you currently doing to spread the word about what you're working on, and how can we help you spread the word out? I know you talked about just being a good neighbor, but are there other things in your, not marketing, but your awareness process or strategy that we want to know about?
Basic skills that I've learned just coming into this arena of advocacy in the past few years. Working on past campaigns, it's coming down to the door knock, right? With the flyers and explaining to residents the importance and validity behind showing up and having these conversations, especially since there's a conversation about a new jail being brought. Heaven forbid, the body cameras are not functioning as these felony arrests start rolling in and these bodies get stacked into this potential new jail that they want, leadership wants. So I'm friendly, happy-go-lucky, short of offering to mow people's grass and garden for them. I don't know what else I could really do. The marketing is a little bit difficult. Getting on social media and kind of choosing what stories to push out as the board is always something I'm very cautious of, just because you want to have full and complete information. We've only really put out the town hall information. We're just going to keep trying to do that, and I'll add the door knocking. It'll be me and 3 little kids knocking on your doors, asking you to come out.
I think the door knocking is important. I think if people understand the importance of it. I was talking to my sister yesterday about menial jobs and how do we get people into these jobs passionately and with a vigor, even regardless of the position, but more focused on what that position does. I think for a door knocker, I was actually trying to get on a campaign and be a door knocker because I understand that at the base level, I have the best vision perspective of the community. If you're someone who wants to work on number one, communicational skills, but number two, if you really want to make a change, yes, we can stay up in lofty offices with AC, but if you really want to make a change, what I've seen back in the day that worked, and what I've heard of stories of when they were making huge movements, not we're talking about, I want to make an event, we're talking about like suffrage, like getting the right, it was simply about regular people just telling one person, look about its exponential growth. You can't be everywhere, but imagine if you had 10 of you, right? Or just 10 that were kind of close, 80%, 70%. That would be enough to get people to start to understand how this is bigger than themselves. When the ball starts rolling, we know this starts to roll big. But one thing I want to touch on, because that caught me off guard, is a new jail. The question I have is if they build a new jail, right? We update or we build a completely new facility, we have to fund it. How do jails get funding? If you could give me some insight on that, because if it's funded by getting people in the jail, then building a new jail as a community person sounds kind of worrisome to me, right? Because where does the money come involved? Because I'm not blind to it. I understand there has to be a way. So what is the push for the new jail, and what should we be knowing about it?
Well, I feel like, let me just say, body cameras are my thing. I went to one new jail forum, and it impressed upon me that, yes, the facility does need to be updated. There were people that were concerned about their family members there. I totally understand it. Loved ones, children, parents, what have you. There were also community members that were like, well, you're not doing right by them in the facility that they're in currently. Why would we want $200 million poured into a whole new facility? I'm also, in agreement with that. There are specific parties working on no new jail, and I really do not want to hit every topic that they have because A, totally not proficient. B, I know budget-wise, this is coming from us, it's coming from other portions and grants, and it's actually pretty concerning because it's like we can't divest just a portion of that to maybe tune up the building or like pour the rest into community programming to kind of deter some of these Black and brown bodies, and certainly the white bodies as well, everyone, but all bodies from being, unnecessarily cattled in to that facility. So I just think for me, when I was sitting in that crowd listening to it, because I went to the very first No New Jail Forum, super informative, and it feels like we really don't have control over the funding. Unless you create a powerful response and you organize around that to where leadership knows, like, you are not the one to play with, sometimes it feels very hopeless. Me sitting from the board perspective in that crowd, all I thought was like, oh, we can't even find body camera footage. How are you saving people? How are people litigating? How are people asking their public defender to, hey, go back and get my body camera footage? What are these public defenders doing when they know the likelihood of going to find some of this stuff? Like, that was the part that really concerned me, because it wasn't so much that you could go into the facility, right? But it was, how are you going to get out? And you need to have an understanding of the law, number one, and two, like, what your legal rights and parameters are. And when you can't see or hear what's happening or go back and look at it, it makes me want to have my community pause on building a new jail, fix some of these policies and procedures, Common Council, that exist within the BPD manual, because they have the right to take back authority of disciplining police from the police commissioner. It's in the city charter, and PPG did a wonderful, wonderful breakdown. Again, Miles Gresham wrote Untapped Police Powers, Buffalo's Untapped Police Powers. You can find it on the PPG website. I want to say it came out in October 2020 or October 21, but that breaks down the legal right that the Common Council has to not only take back the power, but change many of these policies and reprimand officers. So, anytime leadership wants to step in and clean things up instead of giving themselves raises, I appreciate it.
200 million is quite a lot. If y'all want to just donate one to me, I would be very appreciative. But 200 million, and we talk about that going to a jail. It sounds like, from my perspective, again, I know I have the young perspective, we're treating symptoms and not the problem, because the problem is, why are people going to the jail? One thing that Jim talked about a lot of times is about pouring into the youth, right? If you have energy, right? We have a certain amount of energy today, and as you get age goes up, my understanding that your energy may go down a little bit. But when you're young, you have a lot of energy. When you don't have anywhere to channel it, it's going to go one of two places, good or bad. And looking at the community that we have, it's very hard sometimes to find good places to channel energy, right? If you don't have resources, if you don't have transportation, if you can't go outside of your immediate area, you're kind of stuck to a bike, football, or foot races. And so recognizing that as you get older, and 16, running racing isn't as fun as it used to be as you get older. And when you don't have things to put out this energy, that's where you end up spending $200 million for a jail, which is, again, very concerning. One thing I also want to talk about that you mentioned at the first interview, I want to hear the update, is you talked about the police handbook. Right, giving people the information, giving people to know what is the procedure, so we don't have to ask on live. We can actually know and say, no, this isn't right, and I want to take you. What is going on with that information? How can we, again, get access to it to know? Because it's important to know.
Yes. So let me go ahead and correct what I said the last time. I was feeling pretty gloaty, and I thought that they took the manual down because of me. I was wrong. Before anybody tells me that I was wrong, somebody else who professionally I respect quite a bit actually told me on June 6th that I had the wrong link. So what I'm going to do is pass this to my board member. It's going to be the complete manual. It's 900 some odd pages. And what we're going to do is have that put into the chat, so anybody who's watching could absolutely go ahead and download that manual. When you go to the manual, you're going to, if you're on a desktop, hit Control F, and you're going to put in a keyword of your choosing that may interest you. And from there, BPD's various policies will be highlighted. Do not save the link, because don't be like me and then think it's taken down. They update the links, and then you're like, old-minded like me, like, they took it down. It's like, no, they updated it. You shouldn't have saved it. So I'll send that out right now. And then, just being proficient, asking questions. There's usually a police oversight committee meeting ran by Councilman David Rivera. Bless his heart, it's never regularly or something that occurs often. I actually think it just got canceled and postponed to September. But these are meetings that the community would want to be a part of if they could somehow, I guess, take time off of work and appear when the council has it, which is during highly inconvenient hours. But
talking about the community wanting a voice, I think we actually have a caller. Caller, you are on the air.
Why is it no emphasis on keeping out of jail, like building, good community centers and stuff? When they get out of jail, they need guidance, they need some place to come. Why are you not emphasizing on that? Just like, for example, okay, you get out of jail and stuff like that. But let's sign up for a program and stuff, how to be productive. What have you learned in jail? What is your trade? What do you want to do? Where are you going to live at? Should you have to go someplace every day to empower yourself? The prisoners, when they get out, the ex-convicts, they need help like everybody else out there. But okay, prison, what that mean? In other words, and stuff like that, you just want to keep a certain group of people, now a certain group of culture people down. But why can't they do something like that, or send or even sign on it now?
that's a really good question. I believe that this falls back to many of the groups that are tasked to do community outreach and what that comprises itself of. And I only say that because much of the leadership that we have in the city, and when I say leadership, I'm particularly looking to the Common Council. They back many nonprofits who are supposed to be doing specific outreach to help people reacclimate themselves, particularly into their designated area of the city, provide them educational resources, catch up on reading, writing, comprehension, and work resources. What becomes really concerning is when leadership does not directly change the problems that are putting people within the jails, which is actually enacting positive legislation. What's more concerning is that they will task other individuals in the community, grant them money to simply, in my opinion, pacify the scenarios, right? It doesn't give people long-term results. It gives them a shorthand up, but nothing long-term legislative-wise that fixes things. So I don't think people that come out of jail should have to come out and struggle to have a reunification with normalcy, jobs, education, socialization, food, housing, things like that should not be the barriers. But we have a lot of money floating around this city. And that's another thing. It's important for people to understand the budget. That's a moral document. Our leaders are held to this number that gets floated around, particularly with the American Rescue Plan money.
It's not, yeah, but it's not so much though them. You get all these foreigners coming over here. Now, they come over here, they get a hotel, they get money, food stamps. What about the people that was born over here?
I think it's difficult, right, to tell people who are already waiting that you have to wait more, and it's never ideal. It's tragic, really. And it comes down to, if I'm thinking from the perspective of leadership, like how do you help everyone at one time? I think it also kind of comes down to like how our leaders are managing the immediate needs of what's happening. If our needs were managed correctly, ahead of time, many of us would not feel as though we're being forgotten or we're being skipped. We are a city of good neighbors, and we are quite literally a melting pot. And the last thing that I want my neighbors to feel is like they're being forgotten. And I think that points directly back to your council people, because the council people should be making everyone feel as though they have equity in these districts. And I'm really sorry that I'm not quite sure if you're feeling disheartened by that scenario. It sounds like you may be. And I just want to offer you empathy. I don't have an exact answer on that, as I'm not a leader, but they should be responding to you and letting you know how they're going to resolve this. And they usually don't.
Well, no, it's not so much the empathy. I used to be a leasing agent, and this was what was business though. How people who were born over here would have to get on a waiting list. Okay, fine, I understand that though, but our process people would bring off the airplane, and they would have cash assistance ready or waiting for them. They would have food stamps waiting for them, and they would have medical insurance waiting for them, and also the permanent. And I don't mind that doing stuff like that. But why should people who were born over here have to wait so long? That's what I'm talking about, number one. Number two, you got all those people coming and staying out at the airport. I don't have no problem with that, to share the wealth. You understand what I'm saying? Now, this share, that's all.
Caller, we're going to respond to that question, but we do have another caller, so we'll touch on it real quick and then we'll go to the next caller. But thank you for calling in. One thing I want to let you touch on, one thing.
Thank you for taking my call. Have a nice day.
Absolutely. Have a good one. One thing I just want to touch on is rehabilitation versus punishment, right? When you're looking at a jail system, right? What are we focused on? Are we focused on having people be, oh, I'm sorry for my crimes, or I see why that was wrong. And I think what the big thing you can do as a person or a civilian is look up other countries' prison systems and how they rehabilitate, right? Because I think we're fascinated with this idea of behind bars, right? Of animals, of jail, right? You walk down Broadway or Bailey, you see all these stores with bars outside. We're fascinated with this idea of bars and punishment and separation. But look at really what other countries do. And it starts with recognizing that a prisoner is a person who made a bad decision. And we can talk about it as civilians all we want, but if this is really an issue, what you need to do is get down to town hall and make a big deal about it. Because you're drowning in silence, but the lifeguard can't see you. You got to make some noise. You got to thrash a little bit. So if this is really an issue, which it is, if you're driving by the jail every day and saying, why is it people that look like whatever, always walking out, why is it my people struggling? And my people can be whatever you want. Like you said, it's not specific to a division. But that being said, if it's really an issue, then let's take a stand and go talk about it. We do have another caller. And caller, you should be on the air.
Oh, yes, hello, everyone, and good morning. I want to be in agreement with the recent caller. I can actually relate to what she's saying. She's right in what she's talking about with her concerns. And so when there are legacy residents who have been, unfortunately, due to no fault of their own, marginalized and oppressed, and then their tax surcharge penalties or fees are going toward other individuals who are not Americans, who are foreigners, who are immigrants. And at some point, when you want to address these in a position of leadership, charity begins at home. So you have to start with your American people and resolving their issues before you just take, other groups, drop them in these distressed communities already. And then they set up their, settlements within already distressed communities. They're not placing individuals in suburban communities. They're placing them in communities that have been intentionally, again, marginalized and oppressed. And so that is an added stressor from that particular community that, due to no fault of their own, intentional government, powers and leadership have been holding them down. But while they're holding them down, they've been extracting tax surcharges and penalties. And then we see our tax dollars go towards helping others and not getting comparable services for our financial investment in it. Because everyone is being taken care of with the pot of community money. But unfortunately, when it comes to Black American communities, we're not getting comparable service for what is extracted from us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you want to comment on that, that was a lot.
These are great questions. You guys are really giving them to me this morning. Okay, so what I would say, number one, nobody should be feeling forgotten. Nobody. It's 2023. We should not be skipping over residents, people that have been longstanding in the neighborhoods. People should not have to be fighting for housing who have been living in parts of the neighborhood for 10, 20, 30 years. Again, I hate to sound like a broken record. That speaks to leadership. Leadership will take backdoor deals. People should be aware of that. You will see preferential treatment from your council people towards other people. All you have to do is pay attention. Now, what that tends to do is create a divisiveness amongst the neighbors, because in my fair opinion, when you see something outwardly, it can either upset you, bring up negative emotions that would cause you to not conversate with, your neighbors or your leadership. One thing I would encourage everyone to constantly do is to reach out to your council person and consistently question them. They are making a lot of money to sit there and answer your question, go into chambers, do legislation, get out, take pictures, put their names on flyers, wave at you. You certainly can question them with just as much intensity, if not more, I believe, especially the parts of town that have dilapidated housing, lack of proper food, lack of water resources. These are things that you should never let up on. And I think part of what confuses me at times is I don't know if people are waiting on a particular leader. Like, if you're waiting for someone from the community to be like, ooh, me, follow me, and I'll take you to where you gotta go. I'm a firm believer in you don't wait for anybody. If you feel that intense feeling and emotion and you feel like you're not heard, go downtown. Like, don't hesitate, walk right up there and knock on their office doors. Like, these are people that are 100% accessible to you. Don't wait for an email. Don't wait for social media. My council person lives 13 houses away from me, has to make a right-hand turn to get home every night, goes past my residence. What needs to happen is people need to remember, even though they're public officials, they are still human beings at the end of the day. How would you like it if that shoe was on your foot? And so part of this is we can't attack one another. If you see the behaviors, I would recommend, if you see behaviors that are questionable as far as where leadership should get involved, get together as a group. Do not wait for one particular person to lead you, and go down there and speak to them directly. One last thing, we deal with a lot of poverty pimping here too. There's a lot of people who get money to pacify people. So I totally understand the anger that residents feel. I'm sorry, I just don't want to.
No, you're all good. We're coming to about 1 minute, and 1 minute left. I thought we had a little more time, and I was going to comment, but I'll give you the last minute. I know you got working on some new things. Is there people want to contact you? People want to support you? How can they reach out? What events should they be looking out for in the future? And you can take, and I'll take this out after that.
Okay, so we're going to be looking to construct another town hall before the end of August. I'm looking at one central location, which would likely be Merriweather. I would greatly enjoy if the community could come out. We will have a solid day for you within the next 7 days. What we'll do at that event is really, instead of talking at you, we would love to hear from you. Because I think so much great information comes from just listening and not so much of us talking. Like, we read the manuals and we have an understanding, but in order to know how to kind of effectively change some of these policies, or at least ask for the change, we need to hear from people. So we'll be out and we'll update it on the Buffalo Police Advisory Board Incorporated Facebook page. Pardon me. You can reach out at buffalopoliceadvisoryboard@gmail.com. Also, we have a phone number. That number is 716-462-0383. In the event you want to call, leave a message, have a concern or question.
Absolutely. And with all these things that we're talking about, all the callers calling in, it's important that you come to these events and be heard. Again, my name is Austin Martin. It's a pleasure to have this interview today. If you want to hear more from me, I do speaking. You can reach out at info@austinvaughnmartin.com. We'll be returning next week at another great interview. It's been a pleasure this week. I hope you guys have got some great information. I look forward to the changes you guys make in the Buffalo community.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have been a part of it.
Good to see you.
Have a good rest
Thanks
of your
for
day.
having us.
Bye, Buffalo.